The funniest thing about first impressions is how confidently they lie. If you had asked anyone at Westbridge University who owned the campus, they would have answered without hesitation. Ethan Carter. Captain of the basketball team, face of every promotional poster, winner of more games than anyone could remember, Ethan carried himself with the effortless confidence of someone who had never needed a second chance. At 6'4", with an easy smile that filled highlight reels and a reputation that stretched well beyond the state, he had become the standard everyone else measured themselves against. Professors appreciated his discipline, teammates admired his leadership, and students followed him through the hallways as though success itself cast a shadow worth chasing. Ethan had grown used to people staring. He had grown used to hearing whispers when he entered a room. Most of all, he had grown used to believing he already knew exactly who everyone was within seconds of meeting them. That Monday morning seemed no different. The first week of fall semester always brought fresh faces, nervous introductions, and awkward conversations that usually disappeared before October arrived. Ethan barely paid attention as students filtered into Professor Dawson's communications class, tossing his backpack onto the chair beside him before scrolling through messages from his coach about an upcoming preseason tournament. The classroom buzzed with energy until the door opened one final time. A young man stepped quietly inside wearing a navy jacket despite the warm September weather, a camera strap resting across one shoulder, as if it belonged there more naturally than any backpack ever could. His dark brown hair fell neatly across his forehead, and his pale blue eyes scanned the room without urgency or fear. There was nothing dramatic about him, nothing loud, nothing that demanded attention, yet somehow the room grew quieter. "Class," Professor Dawson announced with a welcoming smile. "This is Noah Bennett. He just transferred here from Vancouver, Canada. Please make him feel at home." Noah offered a polite nod instead of a speech. "Nice to meet everyone." His voice was calm, steady, almost impossible to read. Ethan glanced up for barely 2 seconds before looking back at his phone. Quiet, reserved, probably another shy honor student who would spend 4 years hiding behind textbooks. He had seen the type before. Noah chose an empty seat near the window where late morning sunlight stretched across the desk. While everyone else introduced themselves with practiced confidence, Noah simply listened. He noticed details others ignored. The leaves drifting outside, the reflections dancing across polished floors, the laughter echoing from the courtyard below. During the break, Ethan caught several teammates joking nearby. "The Canadian kid looks like he'd apologize if someone bumped into him." One laughed. Ethan smirked. "He probably will." The group chuckled before heading toward the hallway, never noticing Noah quietly picking up a notebook that had slipped from another student's desk before returning it with nothing more than a small smile. No announcement, no expectation of thanks, just kindness so ordinary it almost disappeared. Ethan never saw it happen. By lunchtime, campus conversations had already moved on to football rankings, fraternity parties, and the upcoming rivalry game. Noah walked alone beneath rows of maple trees, occasionally lifting his camera to capture sunlight breaking through the branches. He wasn't trying to impress anyone. He wasn't trying to be noticed. Yet from across the athletic field, Ethan looked up for reasons he couldn't explain. For only a second, he watched the quiet transfer student lower his camera and smile at something invisible beyond the frame. Ethan shook his head, dismissed the strange feeling, and jogged back toward practice without another thought. He had no idea that the one person he considered completely forgettable would soon become the only face he couldn't stop looking for. The next morning, Professor Dawson walked into the classroom carrying a stack of folders that immediately drew a collective sigh from the students. Everyone recognized that expression. It was the look professors wore when group projects were about to become unavoidable. Ethan leaned back in his chair with quiet confidence, already assuming he would be paired with one of his teammates. Instead, Professor Dawson began reading names one by one until he reached the final list. Ethan Carter and Noah Bennett. A few students exchanged amused glances. Someone near the back whispered, "That should be interesting." Ethan let out a short laugh before looking toward the window where Noah calmly closed the photography book he had been reading. There was no complaint, no hesitation, only a polite nod as he gathered his notebook and walked to the empty seat beside Ethan. "Looks like we are partners," Noah said with the same steady voice he always used. Ethan shrugged without looking up from his laptop. "As long as you can keep up," Noah simply smiled. "I will do my best." Their assignment sounded simple enough. They had 3 weeks to produce a presentation about how visual storytelling shaped public perception in modern media. Most groups immediately began discussing ideas, but Ethan glanced at the project sheet for less than a minute before pushing it across the desk. "You seem like the academic type. Just tell me what to say when presentation day comes." Noah looked down at the paper, then back at Ethan. "I was hoping we could actually build it together." Ethan folded his arms. "I have practices every afternoon and games every weekend. My schedule is already full. Then we can meet whenever you have time." "You are persistent." "I made a commitment when I accepted the assignment." Ethan expected frustration or irritation, yet Noah sounded completely sincere. That only made the conversation feel stranger. Before Ethan could answer, one of his teammates called him from the hallway, reminding him about conditioning drills. Ethan stood, slung his backpack over one shoulder, and started toward the door. "Email me whatever you come up with." Noah nodded. "I will." Throughout the week, Noah sent organized notes, thoughtful research, and carefully labeled photographs that connected perfectly with the project theme. Ethan opened each message, skimmed the first few lines, and promised himself he would read the rest later. Later never came. Basketball dominated every afternoon, and by the end of each practice he convinced himself the project could wait another day. Meanwhile, Noah quietly explored the campus with his camera, capturing moments most people hurried past. A groundskeeper laughing with a student while planting flowers. Sunlight reflecting across the library windows. Fresh rain collecting on the bronze university statue outside the student center. He believed stories lived inside ordinary moments if someone cared enough to notice them. Friday arrived with another class meeting. Professor Dawson asked every group to share their progress. Noah calmly explained their initial concept while Ethan stood beside him, realizing he recognized almost none of the material being presented. When the professor complimented the originality of the photographs, Noah simply thanked him without mentioning that he had completed nearly everything alone. Ethan expected him to complain afterward, but as they packed their bags, Noah only asked, "Would Sunday afternoon work for you? We could finish the remaining sections together." Ethan hesitated. For the first time in years, someone had chosen patience instead of admiration or criticism. He answered almost automatically, "Maybe. I will let you know." Noah smiled again, just as quietly as before, then disappeared into the crowd of students crossing the quad. Ethan watched him for a moment longer than he intended before shaking the thought away and heading toward the gym, unaware that every ignored message and every unexpected act of patience was slowly beginning to challenge the certainty with which he judged the people around him. Sunday arrived wrapped in the quiet calm that settled over Westbridge University before another busy week began. The athletic center echoed with distant whistles and bouncing basketballs, while the library remained almost empty, except for a handful of students determined to stay ahead of their assignments. Ethan had nearly forgotten about Noah's invitation until he noticed another polite message waiting on his phone. It simply read, "I reserved a study room at 2 o'clock this afternoon. If you are still available, I will be there." No pressure. No reminder that Ethan had ignored nearly every previous email. Just a simple sentence that somehow made canceling feel unfair. A little before 2, Ethan walked into the library expecting to find Noah buried beneath textbooks. Instead, he discovered the quiet transfer student standing beside a large window with his camera raised toward the campus gardens outside. Sunlight filtered through early autumn leaves, painting soft patterns across the floor. Noah lowered the camera and smiled. "You made it." Ethan looked around the neatly organized table. Every article had been highlighted. Every photograph had been labeled. A presentation outline filled an entire notebook page with careful handwriting. "You did all of this already?" Noah nodded. "Most of it. I thought it would be easier if we built from a strong foundation." Ethan pulled out a chair, feeling unexpectedly uncomfortable. "You could have waited." "I could have," Noah replied. "But I enjoy this kind of work." They spent the next hour discussing ideas. To Ethan's surprise, Noah never spoke like someone trying to prove he was the smartest person in the room. Instead, he asked thoughtful questions, listened carefully, and adjusted his own ideas whenever Ethan offered a better perspective. It felt less like working with a stranger and more like building something together. During a short break, Noah stepped outside with his camera while Ethan remained near the window. Curiosity finally overcame him. He watched as Noah crouched beside a flower bed instead of photographing the impressive buildings or the crowded walkways. A tiny squirrel had stopped near a bench, holding an acorn almost too large for its small paws. Noah patiently waited several minutes without moving before quietly taking one picture. When he returned, Ethan could not help asking, "You waited 5 minutes for one photograph?" Noah looked at the image on his camera screen before handing it over. The photograph was stunning. The afternoon light framed the little animal perfectly, while golden leaves blurred into a warm background. It looked peaceful, almost timeless. "Most people walk past moments like that," Noah said softly. "I like remembering that they happened." Ethan studied the photograph longer than he expected. He had always believed success came from moving faster than everyone else, chasing the next goal before anyone could catch up. Noah seemed to live by the opposite philosophy. He slowed down enough to notice what everyone else ignored. As they packed their bags later that afternoon, they passed a maintenance worker struggling to carry several heavy boxes into the student center. Before Ethan could react, Noah quietly stepped forward, carried half the boxes inside, wished the man a pleasant afternoon, and walked away before receiving more than a grateful smile. There was no audience, no social media post, no expectation of recognition. Ethan found himself watching Noah again, realizing that none of the stories circulating around campus had ever described this version of him. For the first time since Noah had arrived at Westbridge, Ethan wondered whether he had been judging someone he had never truly taken the time to see, and that single thought lingered with him long after the library disappeared behind them. By the middle of the following week, the project had quietly become part of Ethan's routine. Between morning classes and afternoon practices, he found himself checking his email instead of ignoring it, curious to see what new photographs Noah had captured or what thoughtful observation he had added to their presentation. It was a small change, almost too subtle to notice, but it surprised Ethan more than anyone else. One crisp afternoon, practice ended earlier than expected after Coach Harris dismissed the team with a reminder about the upcoming preseason exhibition game on Saturday. Most of Ethan's teammates headed toward the dining hall, laughing loudly as they debated weekend plans. Ethan followed them for a few steps before realizing he had left his notebook inside the communications building. He turned back alone, cutting across the quiet campus where long shadows stretched over the sidewalks beneath rows of maple trees beginning to glow with shades of gold and red. As he reached the building, he noticed Noah sitting alone on the wide stone steps, his camera resting beside him while he watched students crossing the quad. There was no music playing through headphones, no phone in his hands, just peaceful silence. Ethan hesitated before walking over. "You are not taking pictures today?" Noah looked up with a gentle smile. "Sometimes I like observing before I press the shutter." Ethan sat one step lower, surprising himself even more than Noah. "Is there really a difference?" Noah nodded. "A photograph only lasts 1 second. Understanding the moment takes longer." Ethan followed Noah's gaze across the courtyard. A freshman struggled to carry an oversized art portfolio while balancing a cup of coffee. Another student quietly reached over, steadied the portfolio, and kept walking without stopping for thanks. Noah smiled softly. That is the kind of story most people never notice. Before Ethan could answer, dark clouds drifted across the afternoon sky, and a light rain began falling. Students hurried toward nearby buildings, laughing as they shielded themselves with backpacks and jackets. Noah carefully tucked his camera away and stood. "Come on, we should head inside." They had barely reached the entrance when Ethan heard a worried voice behind them. An elderly groundskeeper was trying to gather freshly planted flower trays before the rain became heavier. Without hesitation, Noah jogged over, lifting several trays and carrying them beneath the covered walkway. Ethan instinctively joined him, moving the remaining containers until every plant was protected from the weather. The groundskeeper smiled with obvious relief. "Thank you, boys. Most people were too busy trying to stay dry." Noah simply answered, "We were already here." As the rain continued tapping softly against the roof, the three of them shared an easy conversation for several minutes. The groundskeeper explained that he had worked at Westbridge for nearly 30 years and could recognize graduating classes by the trees they had planted during volunteer events. Noah listened with genuine interest, asking thoughtful questions that encouraged the man to tell even more stories. Ethan mostly stayed quiet, realizing how naturally Noah made people feel heard. Walking back across campus beneath one umbrella, Ethan glanced sideways at his project partner. "You do that a lot." Noah looked puzzled. "Do what?" "You make strangers feel important." Noah thought for a moment before answering. "Everyone has a story. Most people are just waiting for someone willing to hear it." Ethan did not respond immediately. The rain had almost stopped, leaving tiny drops sparkling on the sidewalks as evening sunlight pushed through the clouds. For reasons he could not explain, Noah's words stayed with him far longer than any locker room speech or championship celebration ever had. And for the first time since arriving at Westbridge, Ethan found himself looking forward to seeing Noah again instead of simply expecting to. Saturday arrived with the energy only game day could bring. The gymnasium filled hours before tip-off as students poured into the bleachers wearing school colors and waving handmade signs. Music echoed through the building while the cheer squad rehearsed one final routine near the court. Ethan had experienced this atmosphere dozens of times, yet something felt different that afternoon. As he stretched near the bench, his eyes drifted toward the entrance almost without thinking. He told himself he was simply watching the crowd, but a quiet sense of disappointment settled in when he did not immediately recognize Noah among the hundreds of faces filing inside. The opening whistle blew, and Ethan forced his attention back onto the court. The exhibition game moved quickly, with both teams exchanging fast breaks and sharp passes. Ethan played well, drawing cheers whenever he scored or found an open teammate with a perfect assist. During a timeout late in the second half, he reached for a bottle of water and instinctively glanced toward the student section again. This time he found him. Noah stood near the top row with his camera lifted carefully to his eye, not photographing the scoreboard or the players celebrating after a basket, but focusing on the expressions of the people watching together. Parents smiling with pride. Friends laughing after a missed free throw. A little boy wearing an oversized Westbridge jersey while pretending to dribble an invisible basketball in the aisle. Noah noticed Ethan looking his way and offered a small wave before returning to his camera. Ethan smiled without realizing it until one of his teammates nudged his shoulder. "You know the new Canadian guy?" Ethan answered a little too quickly. "We have a class together." His teammate grinned. "Looks like he has been taking pictures of this whole place." After the game ended with a narrow Westbridge victory, students flooded onto the concourse outside the gym. Ethan finished speaking with coaches and classmates before spotting Noah standing beneath a banner near the exit, reviewing photographs on the camera screen. "How was the game?" Noah asked. Ethan laughed. "You were there. You already know." Noah turned the display toward him. Instead of showing Ethan making a basket or celebrating with teammates, the first photograph captured an elderly alumnus smiling proudly while wearing a faded Westbridge jacket that had clearly been treasured for decades. Another showed two freshmen high-fiving after the final buzzer. Another revealed Coach Harris quietly shaking hands with the opposing coach after the crowd had already begun leaving. "You barely photographed the game," Ethan observed. Noah nodded. "The score will be forgotten in a few years. Moments like these usually are too, unless someone remembers them." They walked across campus together as the evening sky turned shades of orange and purple. Their conversation wandered effortlessly from favorite movies to childhood memories and the differences between winters in Canada and the changing seasons around Westbridge. Noah admitted he missed the first snowfall each year because it made everything feel peaceful. Ethan confessed he had never really stopped to enjoy weather unless it affected basketball practice. When they reached the residence halls, Noah paused before speaking. Would you like to see something tomorrow? Ethan looked curious. What is it? Noah smiled with quiet excitement. There is a place just outside town where the trees overlook the river. It is my favorite spot since moving here. I think you might see something differently if you come. Ethan watched Noah disappear inside the building, realizing he had agreed before even asking why, and for the rest of the evening, he found himself wondering what kind of place could matter enough for Noah to invite someone else into it. The next afternoon, Ethan met Noah just beyond the edge of campus where a narrow walking trail disappeared beneath a canopy of towering maple trees. The air carried the cool freshness of early fall, and every gentle breeze sent a handful of golden leaves drifting toward the ground. Noah greeted him with the same quiet smile before leading the way without explaining exactly where they were going. They walked for nearly 20 minutes, passing a small wooden bridge and a winding creek until the trail opened onto a hillside overlooking a wide river that reflected the afternoon sun like polished glass. A single weathered bench faced the water, surrounded by brilliant shades of red, orange, and yellow. Ethan stopped without saying a word. He had lived only a few miles away for almost 2 years, yet he had never known this place existed. Noah rested his camera beside the bench and looked out across the river. This was the first place I found after moving here, he said softly. Whenever everything feels unfamiliar, I come here. They sat in comfortable silence for several minutes, listening to the rustling leaves and distant calls of birds crossing the valley. Ethan finally spoke. Why did you really leave Canada? Noah lowered his eyes for a moment, carefully choosing his words. Most people assume I transferred because I wanted a new adventure. The truth is much simpler. He smiled faintly, although sadness lingered behind it. My mother accepted a teaching position here after my father passed away 2 years ago. She thought a new beginning might help both of us heal. Ethan felt an unexpected weight settle in his chest. Noah continued quietly. Back home, every street, every park, every season reminded us of him. We were surrounded by memories we loved, but we could never escape the grief attached to them. Moving did not erase any of it. It simply gave us room to breathe again. Ethan looked toward the river, unsure how to respond. For the first time in a long while, words that usually came so easily seemed completely inadequate. Noah broke the silence with a gentle laugh. Do not worry. I am not telling you this because I want sympathy. My father always believed that beautiful things deserved to be noticed, especially after difficult times. That is why I started taking photographs. Every picture reminds me that life keeps giving us reasons to look forward instead of backward. Ethan glanced at the camera resting beside the bench and suddenly understood why Noah never chased dramatic images. He had been searching for hope all along. They remained there until the sunlight softened into the warm glow of late afternoon. Before leaving, Noah handed Ethan the camera. Take one picture. Ethan looked surprised. I have no idea what I am doing. That is all right. Just photograph something you normally would not notice. Ethan slowly lifted the camera and looked through the viewfinder. Instead of focusing on the river, he noticed sunlight shining through a cluster of bright leaves above Noah's shoulder, while the quiet smile on his face reflected peaceful contentment. Without thinking, Ethan pressed the shutter. Noah looked at the screen and smiled a little wider. See? You noticed something different. As they walked back toward campus beneath the fading light, Ethan realized the conversation had changed more than his understanding of Noah. For the first time, winning games, hearing applause, and chasing recognition all seemed strangely smaller than the quiet afternoon he had just shared, and deep inside, a feeling he had never expected was beginning to grow before he even had the courage to give it a name. The days that followed felt different in ways Ethan could not explain. Their class project was nearly finished, yet neither of them seemed eager for it to end. They still met in the library after lectures, shared quiet walks across campus, and occasionally stopped for hot chocolate at a small cafe just beyond the university gates. Conversations that had once revolved around assignments gradually drifted toward favorite childhood memories, future dreams, and the places they hoped to visit one day. Ethan found himself laughing more during those afternoons than he had in months. Noah never tried to compete for attention, yet somehow his calm presence made every crowded place feel quieter. It was not long before other students began noticing the change. One afternoon, as Ethan entered the athletic center, two teammates exchanged amused smiles. "You have been spending a lot of time with the Canadian lately," one of them teased. "I thought you only hung out with athletes." Ethan shrugged, trying to sound casual. "We are finishing our presentation." "For 3 weeks," another replied with a grin. "That is one very serious presentation." Ethan laughed it off, but the comments followed him throughout the day. Similar whispers appeared across campus. Some students assumed Noah was helping Ethan improve his grades. Others guessed Ethan was simply being friendly to a new transfer student. A few enjoyed inventing stories that had no connection to reality at all. Noah seemed completely unaffected whenever curious glances followed them through the hallways. Ethan, however, found himself growing strangely uncomfortable, not because of the rumors themselves, but because he cared far more than he wanted to admit about how those rumors might affect Noah. A few days later, Professor Dawson asked every group to deliver their final presentations. When their turn arrived, Ethan surprised both the class and himself by speaking with genuine enthusiasm about Noah's photographs and the quiet stories hidden inside ordinary moments. Instead of treating the project like another assignment, he described how every image encouraged people to slow down and truly see one another. Noah looked at him with quiet surprise, recognizing ideas Ethan had once dismissed as unimportant. Their presentation earned warm applause, and Professor Dawson praised the balance between thoughtful storytelling and visual artistry. As students packed their bags afterward, Noah smiled. "Thank you for believing in the project." Ethan answered honestly, "I finally understood what you were trying to show me." Later that evening, Ethan walked back from practice expecting another ordinary night. Instead, he noticed Noah sitting alone outside the arts building with an open envelope resting in his lap. His usual peaceful smile was missing. Ethan approached carefully. "Everything all right?" Noah looked up before folding the letter. "My mother was offered another teaching position." Ethan felt his heartbeat quicken. "Here?" Noah slowly shook his head. "Back in Vancouver." Silence settled between them. The autumn wind carried a handful of leaves across the empty sidewalk as neither of them spoke for several long seconds. Ethan finally managed to ask, "Does that mean you are leaving?" Noah stared at the letter before answering quietly. "We have not made a decision yet. She says it would be easier to return now that enough time has passed." Ethan forced himself to nod, but inside, the words echoed louder than the cheers of any championship crowd he had ever heard. For the first time since meeting Noah, the possibility of losing someone before fully understanding what they meant to him no longer felt like a distant thought. It felt real, and as Noah slipped the envelope back into his backpack and quietly stood to leave, Ethan realized there were some moments no photograph could ever preserve if he allowed them to disappear. The following week passed beneath gray skies that seemed to mirror Ethan's thoughts. Noah never mentioned the letter again, and Ethan could not find the courage to ask whether a decision had been made. Instead, they continued meeting between classes, sharing quiet conversations that suddenly felt more precious than either of them admitted. Every laugh lingered longer. Every walk across campus seemed shorter than before. Ethan caught himself memorizing the little things he had once overlooked, the way Noah absent-mindedly adjusted the camera strap on his shoulder, the quiet smile that appeared whenever sunlight filtered through autumn leaves, and the habit of stopping to greet the groundskeeper by name each morning. It felt as though time itself had begun moving too quickly. One Friday afternoon, the university announced an outdoor fall festival celebrating Alumni Weekend. Music floated across the campus lawn while local artists displayed paintings, student clubs organized games, and food trucks lined the sidewalks. Noah wandered through the festival with his camera, capturing families laughing together and children chasing colorful leaves across the grass. Ethan arrived later after basketball practice, still wearing his team jacket, immediately attracting familiar attention from classmates asking for photographs and congratulations after another successful game. For the first time, Ethan found those conversations strangely exhausting. His eyes searched the crowd until they found Noah standing near a small bridge, quietly photographing reflections dancing across the creek below. Without thinking, Ethan excused himself and walked away from the crowd. Noah looked up and smiled. "Escaping your fans?" Ethan laughed. "Maybe I just wanted better company." They spent the next hour wandering through the festival together, tasting warm apple cider, listening to a student jazz band, and watching the sunset paint the sky with brilliant shades of orange and pink. Everything felt peaceful until a familiar voice interrupted them. One of Ethan's teammates approached with a playful grin. "There you are. We have been looking everywhere for you." His eyes shifted toward Noah before he added with a teasing smile, "You two are becoming impossible to separate." Ethan expected Noah to laugh the comment away, but instead he noticed the faint uncertainty in Noah's expression. Before Noah could quietly step back, Ethan answered with complete sincerity. "That is because I wanted to spend the afternoon with him." The conversation fell unexpectedly silent. His teammate blinked in surprise before offering an awkward smile and wishing them a good evening. As he walked away, Noah turned toward Ethan. "You did not have to say that." Ethan met his eyes without looking away. "Yes, I did." They continued walking in silence until they reached the overlook above the river, where colorful lights from the festival shimmered across the water below. Noah rested both hands against the wooden railing. "I have been thinking a lot about Vancouver." Ethan felt his heart tighten. "Have you decided?" Noah looked toward the horizon before answering. "Not yet. My mother told me the choice should not be based on fear or sadness. She said wherever we stay, it should be because we believe something meaningful is waiting for us there." Ethan took a slow breath, finally understanding what he had been afraid to admit for days. "Then I hope you find a reason to stay." Noah looked at him with quiet curiosity. "Would you miss me that much?" Ethan smiled softly, no longer hiding behind confidence or easy jokes. "More than I ever expected." Noah did not answer right away, but the warmth in his eyes said more than words ever could. As the first cool breeze of evening carried a swirl of golden leaves across the bridge, both of them stood quietly beneath the fading autumn sky, realizing that some of the most important answers in life were never spoken all at once but discovered one honest moment at a time. 3 weeks later, the last golden leaves of autumn had disappeared, replaced by the crisp promise of winter. Final presentations were over, basketball season was in full swing, and the rhythm of campus life had settled into familiar routines once again. Yet for Ethan, nothing felt quite the same as it had before Noah Bennett quietly walked into Professor Dawson's classroom. Success on the court still mattered, but it no longer defined the best part of his day. That honor belonged to the quiet conversations between classes, the peaceful walks across campus, and the moments when Noah paused to photograph ordinary scenes that somehow became unforgettable through his eyes. One afternoon, invitations appeared across the university announcing a student photography exhibition featuring selected work from the School of Arts. Ethan smiled the moment he recognized Noah's name printed near the top of the poster. On the evening of the exhibition, the gallery slowly filled with students, professors, and local families who wandered through rows of carefully framed photographs. There were no dramatic landscapes or glamorous portraits. Instead, Noah had filled the room with simple moments that most people would have overlooked. A groundskeeper smiling beneath spring flowers, freshmen laughing over shared umbrellas, a coach quietly encouraging a nervous player before a game, friends studying together beneath warm library lights. Every photograph celebrated kindness, patience, and the beauty hidden inside everyday life. Visitors moved through the gallery slowly, spending far more time with each image than anyone expected. Ethan arrived after practice wearing a clean jacket instead of his team uniform. He walked silently from one photograph to another until he reached the final display at the center of the room. Unlike the others, it was covered by a small curtain waiting for the evening's closing presentation. Noah stepped forward to thank everyone for attending before gently pulling the curtain aside. The final photograph appeared, and the room became perfectly still. It showed a young man standing beneath brilliant autumn leaves beside a quiet river, sunlight filtering through the branches, as he looked toward the horizon with a calm expression that seemed completely different from the confident athlete everyone believed they knew. Ethan immediately recognized the afternoon Noah had handed him the camera for the first time. What surprised him even more was the title beneath the frame. It simply read, "The Moment Someone Chose to See." Ethan felt his chest tighten as he realized Noah had never photographed him as the campus star or the celebrated athlete. He had captured the first moment Ethan allowed himself to slow down and truly notice the world around him. After the applause faded and guests gradually left the gallery, Ethan found Noah standing alone near the windows overlooking the campus. Snow had just begun falling outside, covering the sidewalks in a soft white blanket. Ethan smiled. "So, what happened with Vancouver?" Noah looked out at the snow before turning back with the peaceful smile Ethan had come to treasure. "My mother accepted that sometimes a new home becomes the right one. We decided to stay." Ethan let out a quiet breath he had not realized he had been holding for weeks. Noah laughed softly. "You look relieved." "I am," Ethan admitted honestly, "because somewhere along the way you stopped being my project partner. You became the person I wanted beside me every ordinary day after that." Noah's eyes brightened with quiet warmth. "I was hoping you would say something like that." They stepped outside together as snowflakes drifted gently through the evening air, neither of them rushing to escape the cold. Around them, students hurried toward warm buildings, barely noticing the peaceful silence settling across the campus. Ethan looked up at the falling snow before glancing toward Noah, finally understanding the lesson that had changed him forever. Championships would eventually become memories. Applause would always fade. But the people who quietly taught you how to see the world with kindness could transform your life in ways no trophy ever could. And as they walked side by side into the first snowfall of the season, both of them knew this was not the end of their story but the beginning of something far more meaningful than either had ever expected.